Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. It is Sandy and Sean. Sandy Club is off today. I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports. The Monday after the Denver Broncos had their week one, at least preseason week one opener, a 34-30 win over the Indianapolis Colts on the road. So a great debut for Bo Nix. We'll talk about that a lot over the course of the program. Nate Lundy will join us. Cody Roark will join us to talk about other standouts later as well. But for the Broncos, a very impressive start on the season. You see a little bit of some of the things that we've been explaining to you out in training camp. Talked about the idea that ignore the depth chart. Told you that all last week. Told you that Bo Nix would be the second quarterback in no matter what he was listed on the depth chart. That's exactly what happened as expected. We talked about Jarrett Stidham starting long before Sean Payton said it. After a while, when you cover football teams, you get an idea how these things are going to go. And so for the Broncos, no real surprises there. I think that the part of the game that was probably the most interesting for me is watching it over the entire time. Nothing really surprised me. These are the things that I expected. I expected Jarrett Stidham to start and look like Jarrett Stidham. I expected Bo Nix to be efficient and ready for the stage. And for the most part, he was. On the first drive, an early throw kind of tried to force it to Greg Dulcich. That was almost intercepted. That was basically the only bad play that Nix had the entire time, got better all the way through. So a good start there and impressive for Zach Wilson as well, obviously playing with the threes and a guy that's started more games in the NFL than anybody on the Broncos roster at quarterback. So you expect at least some bit of promise there against subpar players on the other side. But we'll talk a little bit about that too. Stidham started the game, went 4 for 7. That's a 57.1 completion percentage, 37 yards, threw an interception. The interception, not his fault. That should have been a completed pass to Samaje Perine, who ended up is trying to bobble it and then tipped the ball upwards, which led to the interception. That's on Perine, who is a normally reliable receiver. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the week goes along as well, because there's some interesting things going on in that running back room. And Zach Wilson late in the game comes in, goes 10 for 13. That's a 76.9 completion percentage. That's outstanding. 117 yards and a 103.7 passer rating, slightly higher than Bo Nix's 102.3. Nix went 15 for 21 in the meat of the game, essentially. 71.4 completion, pretty similar to, matter of fact, what you saw when he was at Oregon last year. 125 yards, a touchdown, could have had another touchdown as well, but had a chance to talk post-game. The game aired on Channel 20, obviously in concert with Channel 9, the way they put that together. Channel 9 is NBC, as you know, locally, and they were showing some other things. Obviously, the Olympics were still underway over on NBC, so the Broncos on Channel 20. Nevertheless, he had a chance to talk with 9 News' Scotty Gange after the game.
Man of the day, Bo, my favorite part of today, it's 4th and 1 on the 5-yard line. I look in the huddle and you're smiling, looking as relaxed as ever. How comfortable did you feel out there today?
Very comfortable. You know, I thought those 10 out there with me, we were going to get the job done, and that's what we did. But it's just fun getting out there and playing with the guys, playing against a different team, and just getting our feet wet a little bit for the season.
You've got 7 days until your first start in a Denver Broncos uniform. What do you think before watching film is the one thing you want to improve on before coming home to Denver?
Just always focusing on getting a little bit sharper and just executing whatever's called, and excited to be back home next week, and it's going to be a good week of practice.
Broncos country on social media was thrilled with you today. I'm wondering if you have any sort of message to them after your first game.
Yeah, big win for the crew today, big win for the team. Excited to be back, like I said, next week, and then always just ways to get better, always trying to find different ways that we can help the team out. But I thought it was a great win for us today, coming on the road, getting our first win over with, and excited to be back home.
Absolutely. Congrats on the win, Bo. Thanks for the time.
Spoken a little bit like maybe a veteran. Of course, Bo Nix with the most starts in history of college, 61 career starts from Auburn to Oregon, and in big programs and at high levels. Oregon last year, of course, into the semifinals of the college football playoffs. So Nix looks comfortable. Looking at my notes for the game, and I watched the All-22 again this morning, trying to make sure I was able to confirm or check out other things that I saw. And yeah, there were good plays. I mean, Nix had the near interception I told you about. He did fumble a snap in the first quarter as well, got it back. Those were maybe the rookie jitters, but He looks agile in the pocket. He looked like he was ready to go. He looked like he was in confident form. Blocking was hit and miss at times. The Broncos still had issues with false starts. That's another thing that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Garrett Bowles had a holding penalty as well. But worth noting, the Broncos, whether it was Stidham, Nix, or Wilson, did not surrender a sack. A little bit has to do with the line. A little bit has to do with the quarterbacks playing more Sean Payton offense, get it out quick. And that's where I've been talking about it all offseason. Why Bo Nix is likely to work very well with the Broncos, because for Sean Payton, he's essentially the right guy. Now, what his ceiling is, we don't necessarily know. I've made the Derek Carr comparisons before. I'll continue to make them because he looks like that kind of player to me. A little more agile, but similar arm strength, similar composure, similar read of the game. A guy that you can win with as long as you put a good team around him, and maybe isn't going to carry you. He's not going to become Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. I don't see that for Bo Nix, but you can see a guy that you can win football games with. And that part, impressive. A couple good scrambles. Actually, Garrett Bowles got beaten in the second quarter pretty badly. Nix was able to roll around and turn that into a first down. That was good. Had a pass to Josh Reynolds that probably should have been a touchdown. Dropped it in perfectly over the back shoulder. Just couldn't quite reel it in. A good RPO read, by the way, in that second quarter as well. Read that right and took another run for a first down. And then, of course, in that second, the play action pass to Marvin Mims for a touchdown, a good quick read, and more than enough arm strength to get it out there quickly enough. So Nix really did look good. There was a play in the near halftime. Devon Vele, who has looked fantastic almost all of training camp. He's looked great. He and Nix did not sync up. I went and looked at it again. I think Vele cut inward and Nix was looking for a back shoulder throw in the red zone. That appears to be perhaps more of Vele's issue, but there was a little miscommunication there by the pair of rookies, the receiver from Utah and the quarterback from Oregon. But in the end, essentially, it just looked like Bo Nix was already quarterback one. And in many ways, that's a lot of what this preseason game felt like. Nix was only out there for 7 attempts. Stidham was out there for 7 attempts. Nix for 21, Wilson for 13. Now, some of that is because you're not going to run the starters out very long in a preseason game. 2, Sean Payton knows what he's got in Jarrett Stidham. There's familiarity there and comfort there. But the idea that this has been a quarterback competition was always silly from the get-go. It never was a quarterback competition. It was always about Bo Nix, and it was always about Bo Nix's job. He had the job the day he was drafted. He had the job, quite frankly, before he was even drafted, because everyone knew that Bo Nix was going to the Denver Broncos at 12, and nobody was ready to jump up ahead of them and go ahead and pick him. So this has been in the works for a while. The question going forward will be interesting to see how it shakes out. Nick's expected to probably start the next game against the Packers. We'll talk more about that as well. The Packers will be in for a joint practice on Friday, and they will discuss how that all shakes out over the course of the week, and we will as well. Sometimes those joint practices more valuable than the preseason game, and in this case, it might really be that way. Reports out of Green Bay are that the Packers do not intend to play their starters in the second preseason game against Denver, but obviously they will in the joint practice. Further kind of evidence that when the league eventually gets to 18 games, and it will, and removes another preseason game, and it will, the joint practices are going to be what a lot of teams go to because they're more valuable. You can control them. And we'll talk about that over the course of the week. But Nick's likely to get the start there in that game too. And then I think that's probably it. I think it's over more or less already. I think Bo Nix did enough in this game that Sean Payton's hand is probably forced. Not that he doesn't want it anyway. Payton clearly would like Bo Nix to be QB1. But Nix looked absolutely no worse than Stidham at any point. He looked more agile than Stidham. Arm strength looked at least as good as Stidham. He was as composed as Stidham. More accurate than Stidham. So there's really no reason not to start Bo Nix in week 1. And as I've talked about before, starting Stidham in Seattle doesn't do either player any favors. The Broncos need to know what they've got in Bo Nix. And what they've got is a guy that is already, I think, even one preseason game in, clearly the match of Jarrett Stidham. And if he's obviously as good as Jarrett Stidham in this offense, in which Stidham's already spent a year, then realistically you can look at it and say Bo Nix is already better. He should be starting. But even more than that, if you start Stidham, The second anything goes wrong, the second there's a pick, the second there is a bad series, the second anything goes haywire for the Broncos country is going to jump all over the team and say, when is Nix playing? So it doesn't help Stidham. Stidham is just there until he fails enough that Nix takes the job. So you don't help Stidham by starting him. You don't help Nix by sitting him. Don't ask me about that. You can ask Payton Manning, who talked about it this summer at the Mizell Institute when he was being honored about how needing to go in there and playing. And remember, Payton Manning had an abysmal rookie season, ton of interceptions, never was that bad again, needed that. The only way you get better at playing any sport at any level is actually to play it. We've got to move on from this mythology that quarterbacks, for some reason, should sit and watch and that makes them better. There's no indication that makes them better. There's no indication that Aaron Rodgers is better than he would have been otherwise because he sat behind Brett Favre. Brett Favre wasn't coaching him, wasn't doing all that much. There's no indication that Patrick Mahomes is better because he spent most of a year behind Alex Smith. Alex Smith, certainly a friendly team guy and having a bit of a mentor, but not sitting around coaching him. Alex Smith wasn't hoping that Patrick Mahomes would take his job. Same thing Joe Flacco talked about when he pointed out he wasn't here to babysit Drew Lock. Jared Stidham isn't Aaron Rodgers. Jared Stidham isn't even Alex Smith. Jared Stidham isn't even Joe Flacco. Jared Stidham's a career backup, which is a great role, by the way. You make a lot of money doing that. Argued for years, the best job in Colorado isn't even the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. It's the backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos because you can do no wrong. There will always be a certain percentage of people that think that's the guy that could even be better. John Elway had people calling for Gary Kubiak over the course of his career at times. So it's not a condemnation of Stidham. It is an acceptance that the reality is that starting Stidham doesn't do him any favors. Unless you see the wheels fall off for Bo Nix, he needs to start on week 1. It's about the only thing that makes sense. The other thing interesting about the preseason, and obviously you get an idea of certain things as they go, is the idea that Sean Payton's offense, something I've told you about for the last few weeks of how this team was going to operate, was on clear display. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I want to remind you a little bit that our coverage is obviously brought to you by a lot of great partners. One of those is our friends at Constitute Health. The goal at Constitute Health is to optimize your own health, and your own health is yours, right? Everyone's different. Everyone is looking for something different in their life. Body types are different. All sorts of things are different. So you want to work with somebody who is going to optimize your health in the way you want to. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to sleep better. Maybe you want more energy over the course of the day. They can help you with all of that. At Constitute Health, they work with over 2,000 centers for blood draws. You get a blood draw, you get it to Constitute Health. They process it, and then they'll work with you on a one-to-one basis with their trained medical professionals with complete transparency regarding your health concerns, and your health goals. And then you put together a plan. You're building the foundation for optimized health and longevity using cutting-edge medical therapies that help your body perform as it should or as it used to. They offer hormone replacement, semaglutide, GLP-1 therapies, peptides, NAD+, and more. You name it, whatever you're looking for, they can help you with it. They help burn fat, assist with weight loss, optimize sleep and sleep cycles, enhance your cognitive and executive functions, build and retain muscle fat, as well as many other personal benefits. So start feeling the way you want to feel. And you can do that with our friends at Constitute Health. Check them out online at constitutehealth.com or mention Mile High Sports. Get $50 off your initial blood work and consultation. And if you're on milehighsports.com looking for any of the terrific content we're putting there, you'll see that link right there. Click the Constitute Health link and get $50 off your initial setup with the folks at Constitute Health. Optimize your health your way with our friends at Constitute Health. Joining us now on the
Powered by Common Spirit.
Not here. We're in the Mile High Sports
Why
studio.
not?
And that's Nate Lundy.
Maybe it should be.
Are we?
We got room for signage back here.
Anyone,
Just saying.
we know anybody at Common Spirit? Yeah, we got some space.
I don't know.
We can make it
I
fit.
don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know if we know anybody there or not.
Yeah, well, the Broncos are out
I
there
could try
today.
tearing my other Achilles and seeing if they act like they know me.
Yeah, like
Oh wait, we know you guys.
yeah,
Mile High
we've seen that.
Sports.
We've seen that guy
Here, we'll
before.
repair your Achilles.
Your other one.
and we'll sponsor your studio.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Wow, how many Or you can wait for me.
Well, I was going to say, you've had
too.
more surgeries than I have.
I've had Mark Schlereth number of surgeries.
Nobody's had Mark Schlereth number of surgeries, because I'm actually convinced that every time you ask Mark Schlereth about his surgeries, the numbers goes up.
Well,
it's become like an NFL fish story. It really has.
I mean,
I give Stink a hard time, but I mean, if you really want to know how many surgeries he's had, just stand next to him for about 15 minutes and then he'll tell you.
Yeah.
You don't even have to ask him. You could be discussing children's poetry.
Well, you got to,
and all of a sudden he'll be like, bam, let's talk about my knees.
I mean, that's the brand, right? So, I get it.
It happens.
You got to represent the brand, and
all right.
You got surgeons. I get it. And we love Stink, obviously a former
colleague
of ours.
He's a great dude.
Radio life, but always good to see him out at camp as well. And
and
that brings us, Nate, to a little bit of what I wanted to discuss, the Broncos offensive strategy, because what you saw in this game, it was funny. If you actually had a chance to catch the Colts broadcast, I watched the Colts broadcast as well. They were somewhat surprised that the Broncos lined up multiple times in what they then called an old school I formation. That's what the Colts broadcast said. Well, the idea behind this, and this is something I've talked about all camp long, the Broncos are planning to be a power run team with play action concepts and using short passes over the middle. That was pretty evident. Audric Estime, the rookie out of Notre Dame, Tyler Beatty, who's been with the team a couple years, Blake Watson, undrafted college free agent out of Memphis, all with touchdown runs. The Broncos ran the ball consistently. They ran it early, they ran it often, and they ran it inside and outside. But that inside running game, even early on with Jaleel McLaughlin going through the tackles, the Broncos are clearly going to make it an identity to control the clock, control the pace. They intend to run the football and then bring you in and then go with play action. Is it old school? Yeah, I guess as the Colts announcers called it, it is. But the reason it sticks around is because when you actually run it right, it works.
Well, if you've got the talent to do it, yeah, of course. And I'm still not convinced that they have the talent to do it successfly all the time. But they've got enough talent on this squad to be able to do it enough to keep defenses on their heels. Now, like I said, I'm only going to read a certain amount. I said this on Friday's show. I'm only going to read a certain amount into what happened on Sunday. Okay. Do not expect more than that out of me. Do not expect a deep dive. Don't. If you want that, go read Cody's stuff at milehighsports.com. Because that's not what I'm going to do, because I think that you only see certain things. You see, to a certain extent, vanilla play calling. Did you get a glimpse of what might be behind the curtain? Of course. But you're also going to see very vanilla play calling. Right. A, you don't want people to get hurt. B, you don't want to show your hand of what you're going to be doing for 17 games coming up in September. And the final piece is you don't really know what you have. Right?
Yeah, that's the point, right?
I think one of the, you want to talk about the running and the play action. Let me go back to something in the broadcast, okay, with Steve and with Ryan, that was airing locally. When Nix botched the snap, all right, Ryan Harris had a fantastic, love Ryan, great job, Ryan, had a fantastic breakdown of what happened and what he needs to do to get better, specifically with Bo Nix, okay? He talked about, because there was a camera angle that they showed from behind so that you could see the snap, and then you could see the center start to pull over to the left, and you could see the movement that Bo Nix did, okay? And Ryan talked about how if you're going to play that level of play action, if that is going to be so important to what you're trying to do, that Bo Nix needs to learn how to sell the run better, right? And in what he was doing, Ryan showed that basically in moving his hips and moving the way that he did, he didn't do anything on that particular snap that would have sold the idea of, I'm going to fake the handoff and then I'm going to roll and pass. And so if you're going to continue to do that power run, you're going to follow it up with some play action types of things. What we saw on Sunday, the things that you can dive into a little bit, are little moments like that. He got lucky that he fell back on that snap.
Yeah. Could have lost that snap.
It could have been a little bit cleaner. It also bounced a little bit off of the line's leg. But at the same time, that was one that Bo needed to come straight back so that he could then fake the handoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then be able to go wherever he wanted to go with the play. And in part because he started to move to the left right away, the snap wasn't clean. And that was one of the things that Ryan talked about on the broadcast.
Right.
So those are the sort of things that I will take out of yesterday's game. But beyond that, I'm not going to read too much into it. I got to be honest.
And some of those things can, maybe we'll find out. We'll find out if he repeats those mistakes. Some of those can be chalked up to the, your very first game. Obviously, it is a first NFL game, something he's been dreaming of his whole life. And it also, obviously, the early throw to attempt to Dulcich wasn't a good throw, could have been intercepted. But I think for the most part, you saw a really impressive performance. And it's not fair to evaluate Stidham in only 7 attempts that were, again, very vanilla, right? Nobody's calling any particularly extravagantly clever plays. But what you did see from Payton, especially with Nix, is you saw them using more, again, flashback to the Saints, when they were at their peak when Sean Payton was calling those plays. More swing plays, more wheel routes by the running back. A lot more of that effective, by the way, as well. Both Blake Watson and Julian McLaughlin caught good-sized catches on those plays. The Broncos are going to spread teams wide in that regard. That part is really interesting. And it's also worth noting that I guess when you talk about the things that were good, and by the way, Nate, the Broncos 34 points, led all NFL teams in scoring in the opening weekend. Might not have had that on your bingo card. I know I didn't. 16 different Broncos caught passes, but one of them was not Troy Franklin. 16 catches by different receivers. Franklin didn't get one. His early going for the Broncos seems to be a lot bumpier than other rookies. There was this hope that Franklin, with the speed and with the connection with Nix, obviously as his leading receiver in Oregon last year, would materialize more quickly. But for whatever reason, Franklin's had a slightly tougher job adjusting to the NFL than, let's say, Nix or some of his other teammates.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that there's just enough. Look, we saw the snap count. I think it was the Post has already done it. Everybody's been talking about, Troy Franklin didn't do anything. Stop, y'all. Please. Save me a headache. I really don't want to start off my week with that big of a headache. Stop. Okay? Troy Franklin's going to be just fine. He is.
But he may not be a major part of the offense. Immediately.
But what did you and I talk about at camp approximately 10 days ago? If there was one high-end draft pick that can afford to acclimate and take time, it's Troy Franklin. Because that wide receiver room, while not elite, has a lot of dudes and a lot of ability in that room. And so he can take his time. He doesn't have to come out guns a-blazing. If they had gotten, if Jerry Jeudy was gone and Cortland Sutton was gone and Tim Patrick was still hurt and all of those kinds of things were happening, then yes, there would be more pressure on Troy Franklin. But right now, there's not pressure on him. Let the kid acclimate. I think he's got great skill and great upside, and it's okay that he didn't show it in the first preseason game. Don't you think? I mean, we talked about that.
Well, yeah,
there's plenty of room. Even if Audric Estime had issues, which let's argue kind of did. Okay. That's a stacked running back room.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need him to come in and instantly be Saquon Barkley, right? He can come in and be a part of this rotation. They can utilize him from a goal line standpoint if that's what they want to do. All of those kinds of things can happen because there are other guys that can pick up slack. And Troy Franklin is in that position right now. Do we need offensive linemen to step up, Sean? Yeah, we do.
It was
because we've already lost one.
You've lost one in Quinn Bailey. Well, we'll talk about the man that basically filled Bailey's spot in just a little bit. Cody Roark will join us in a couple segments, and we'll talk about that because one of the standouts actually was the man who replaced Quinn Bailey. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you're right when you talk about Franklin. Look, Cortland Sutton and Reynolds are your starters. Tim Patrick, now healthy again, looks like he'll be effective. Marvin Mims, they did work into the offense, and he got a touchdown. Presumably, that's your number 4 among wide receivers alone. And then Troy Franklin is in the mix with Brandon Johnson, who was second on the team in touchdown receptions last year, with David Sills, I suppose, Lil Jordan Humphrey. We talked about Devontae Vele, who also had his own kind of disconnect with Nix in that game. You're right. At the wide receivers in both Franklin and Vele, I like the talent of both of them. I think they're both promising. I think I like them both. But yeah, first preseason game, underwhelming. Sure.
Yeah.
Is that a surprise? Not really.
He was absolutely underwhelming, but I think that's what happens sometimes when you get when you get fans that are like, oh, well, this guy's a draft pick. He's supposed to. Okay, yeah, he's eventually supposed to be that kind of person, but not that anybody did this after yesterday, but it's like I get to that point where people get so quick to label somebody a bust,
right,
or a boom. For that matter. I mean, there are also plenty of people that heap way too much praise right out of the gate about somebody. I think you got to be able to give these guys some time. And so that's why I mentioned what I mentioned about Troy, the same way that I mentioned it about Audric, is that you need to recognize what the status is in the room and the talent that exists at the position, and the necessity that you don't necessarily need somebody to explode in their first opportunity.
But you did Bo Nix. And you got a really good performance for a first NFL
well,
game.
I think that you did, but
a good performance.
But it was imperfect. I mean, he showed us yesterday that he still has things to work on.
Room, you need someone to bubble up quick.
Sure you do. But we also said that even if he didn't, we were okay with it. That the idea was to be able to examine what his performances are week by week and to look for incremental improvement. That's all you really need to be able to look for. So guess what? Yesterday he set whatever baseline you want to call it. I saw him screw up. I just talked about that center exchange that like I said, I thought Ryan Harris broke it down really well. We know what the expectation or the hope is for him, but it is ridiculous in any way, shape, or form to expect that that's going to happen quickly. Right? You need to recognize the acclimation period that takes place getting into the NFL and adjusting to the speed of the NFL and defensive linemen and linebackers and how to read a defense and all those kinds of things. It's not going to be the same as it was for him in Eugene. So yeah, did he have a good performance? Yes. I think, you look at the activity that was taking place on social media yesterday, especially during the time that he was on the field. And there were a lot of folks, a lot of Broncos people that I follow, a lot of fans that were saying, okay, I saw what I needed to see. Yes, you did.
Mm-hmm.
Good and bad. You saw what you needed to see. Okay. Didn't have deer in the headlights. Post-game interview, carried himself well.
Sure.
All those kinds of things that you want to be able to see out of your starting quarterback. You started to see some of those things. Now let's talk about Saturday against Green Bay. Then let's talk about game 3 against the Arizona Cardinals. And then let's get ready for him to start at, like I said, where I think is one of the best, if not the best, home field advantages in the entire NFL at Lumen Field.
And obviously, when we talked about it a little bit ago,
is it still Lumen Field, by the way?
I think it's still Lumen Field.
It's not.
I don't know.
It's not Starbucks.
Maybe it's powered by Common Spirits.
It's like Lumen Field at Starbucks Stadium or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out.
Over on our comments, pointing out pass rush needs help. I see that over there on the comments. So I see that one. And I will say this. It does, but it is improved because I'm going through my notes for the game. And here we go, quite frankly. One of my notes, and I'll read it verbatim as I jotted it down. Denver's second-string defensive line got pushed down the field on Indy's first touchdown drive. Only defensive lineman Malcolm Roach looked solid.
Yes.
The Broncos got 2 sacks over the course of the game, one by Jonah Ellis. We'll talk more about him in a little bit, of course, in his rookie debut for the preseason. But it's a little more complicated than that, because I thought the Broncos starters, who were not in for a terribly long time, when you're talking about the starting 3 on the line, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, Zach Allen, and then the starters on the outside, if you want to call them outside linebackers, edge rushers, whatever terminology you like. I thought Jonathan Cooper stood out. He was all over the place. I thought he was really, really good. And I think there is enough there. The Broncos were getting, I think, enough pressure to frustrate with 4, and that is probably ideal. But when you're talking about the depth behind the starters, that's problematic. Now, the Broncos think they have the outside handled with Nick Benito and Baron Browning, or some combination. It'll presumably, when the season starts, it'll be Cooper and Browning, and then Benito and Ellis coming off the sides. So they think they may have that. But if you're talking about the second string defensive line, no, the Broncos have no real depth there. And yeah, if you're talking about that, the pass rush is a concern. So
yeah, but how many teams could we say that about? Come on,
especially on the defensive line, where there's a lot of teams that do not have.
The second stringers didn't do as good as I would have hoped. Well, that's why they're second stringers,
right? And this is a team that is not expected to go anywhere right now. Remember,
this is not rocket surgery, y'all.
With I see what you did there, but most of the large national outs had the Broncos rated as the 30th best team on paper coming into the league. So that's been the Broncos' challenge for years. And this is the one thing that I think Sean Payton and George Payton have done well. In the last couple of drafts, they have hit guys that at least have a floor of making the roster and contributing. Yeah. So as long as they're making the roster contributing, you can start building depth. The Broncos for too many years had drafts in which you had guys that couldn't even make the roster. And that's why the Broncos are still suffering from this lack of depth across the board. And that takes a while to rebuild. There's nothing you can do about it. It simply takes time. But yeah, there is a concern on the second string, but the initial pass rush I thought was relatively good. Again, tough to say in a preseason. We'll find out more probably this week. And we may find out more in the joint practices against the Packers than we will against the preseason game.
Well, and I want to come back to an overriding theme, folks. The Broncos are in salary cap hell. Please don't forget that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So even if they recognize where they are missing something, where they are lacking something, this team right now is handcuffed. There's not a lot they can do about it. So you just need to accept it, that is what 2024 is going to look like. That's it. That's all you have to be able to do as a fan. That is all you have to do, is accept that this is what 2024 is going to be like. And it's not going to mean elite players and elite opportunities to go grab, oh, well, this guy got cut, we should go sign him. With whose money? Okay, you don't have that opportunity right now. So you know what? Are there going to be some positions that lack? Yes. Is it better than last year? I feel like what I saw yesterday was already better than what I saw in the preseason last year. And yes, I know it's preseason, but at least I'm comparing apples to apples. I'm comparing preseason to preseason. And then we'll get to the regular season. We'll wait and see what happens. But for crying out loud, accept the fact that 2024 looks the way that it does because this team has to get out from under salary cap hell and then build. And at least for once, they have been willing to say, we are building. That's all that really matters. All right. That's all that matters. All right. Home game coming up this weekend. Home game coming up after that because we got the two preseason games at home. Right. The really boring part of being a season ticket holder is years like this, where it's like, all right, I get 8 regular season, but I get 2 preseason.
Oh, goody.
That basically I could stand on a street corner and just offer for free and people still don't want them. But I digress. What we do know is that as we creep through preseason, it also means we're getting closer and closer to regular season. We're getting closer and closer to college football time, which means you may be getting those parties together at your house. Maybe you're going to be enjoying that first road game against Seattle, and you're like, all right, I want to be able to have some fun. I want to get some food for everybody that I know they're going to enjoy. You can't go wrong with some really great barbecue, folks, and that's our friends at Rolling Smoke Barbecue with their 4 locations around town. You can go and get the to-go. You can get the catering from them. You order it in advance. They make sure they've got everything ready for you. You just come in, you pick it up, get all the different sauces, you get all the different sides, all the different things that you can pick from, and you can find that catering menu and your options on their website at rollingsmokebbq.com. That's all you got to do is go find them, rollingsmokebbq.com. So you go check that out. You find out exactly what you want to be able to order, and then you pick it up so that when you're having the party, you can be in front of the TV, cussing and throwing stuff like you want to be, because that's what we all do as football fans. And you don't have to be stuck in the kitchen worrying about making sure that everybody's food is all set. You get to enjoy it just like your guests do. I told you they got 4 locations. You can find all of these on the website, but it starts off at the Stanley Marketplace in Aurora, as well as the Golden Mill. You can find them down in Centennial at the corner of Dry Creek and University, right across the street from Arapahoe High School. And the brand new location that just opened up, it's there in Wheat Ridge. And of course, if you're headed out to Red Rocks, we've told you before, they've got a booth right there at the top if you want to grab yourself a nice little pulled pork sandwich or something like that to be able to enjoy before the show. It's Rolling Smoke Barbecue, rollingsmokebbq.com. And when you stop by, make sure you tell them that Mile High Sports, Nate and Sean sent you.
Well, we talk about the performance of Bo Nix and the Broncos in their preseason win, 34-30 over the Colts. 34 points by the Broncos would be a significant output in the last couple of seasons.
Hell, the over-under was 37.5.
Right. How about that?
Yeah, I screwed that bet up for y'all on Friday, didn't I?
I mean, at least put it this way. You hate losing them when they're close, because you kind of feel like you could have gone the other way. But when that happens and there's 64 points scored, you're like, okay, nobody saw that one coming. But the Broncos do come out on top. Nix with the 15 for 21 performance. They scored on 4 of his 5 drives.
Yes.
And the other drive in which he did not, by the way, was the one in which Lucas Kroll fumbled which was a completed pass. Kroll fumbled it. That drive obviously didn't end in points because it was fumbled. Also worth noting that Bo Nix made the tackle on that after Kroll fumbled, and it was it was picked up and run back. So at least a very efficient and effective performance. And I've talked about this a lot, but I'll just read you this. Bo Nix has to start day one. Let's not forget his age. He's more than mature enough and has the pro hours of playing time under his belt. And if you're thinking, Sean, I've heard you say that before. You've been saying that the whole time. That wasn't me. That was TJ Ward. Knows a little bit about quarterbacks, at least how to defend against them.
Yes.
So that was TJ Ward's tweet after the game yesterday talking about Bo Nix, and it's the same sort of thing. 4 out of 5 drives it scores. We'll leave you with TJ Ward's tweet, and then, of course, the NFL took an opportunity to let you see all of Nix's highlights. We'll show them to you here.
P-Rod, the third down back, is in there for Denver. Nix is looking that way and has a man. That should be a first down. And because of ended his season prematurely last year. Catch made. Spin move made, and that's going to be good for a first down. 3rd and 3. Nix trying to buy time. Gets around Adibare, and it'll be a first down. And Nix will keep. Gets around Titus Leo, gets a good lead block, and
good athlete.
Nate Atkins with the lead block. Valet the catch. Flowers ushers him out of bounds. Nix throws, touchdown. Touchdown grab for Denver. Marvin Mims Jr. on the Nix. Let's find an open man. And that's Kroll, who just had the fumble. Colts bring 4. Again, it's Kroll. And he'll have a first down. Pick it up. Good timeouts. Nix. Catch made, but now you got to get to the line and get set quickly. Pick from Wagner College last year. Catch made. Tackle missed. First down Denver, and stepping out of bounds. On the screen, McLaughlin. Good job by Johnson to shed a block. And
Be front, which I hope becomes a part of their defense.
McLaughlin by his lonesome. First down. Spins away from the tackle of Trevor Denbo. In the flat. Catch made. First down.
Broncos obviously get a lot from Bo Nix in this game. Joining us now to talk about it, the lead writer for the Denver Broncos on Mile High Sports and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, our own Cody Roark. Cody, thanks for the time today. Obviously, we see the Broncos in action. We've been waiting to see this for a long, long time, but I guess we'll start right off. Your thoughts on what you saw from Bo Nix in his preseason debut?
Yeah, I think first off, the one thing I saw from him was he looked confident. Now, I'd say his first 2 throws, you could make the argument that maybe a little bit of nerves there, especially that first one to Greg Dulcich down the middle. It's kind of a dangerous area. You don't want to lead your tight end who's had injury concerns the last couple of years right into a thumping safety. And look, Indianapolis has some really good defensive backs, at least on the starting side of things. So that was a dangerous throw there. But from that point, I felt like, and you just saw it on the top of that clip there, it was that 3rd down play. He rolls out to his left, finds Cortland Sutton downfield for 22 yards, toe tap on the sideline. Those are like little confidence builders there. I felt overall the stuff that we saw in the game in the preseason, I think are the things we've seen from Bo in the last week and a half during training camp. Like he settled into it. He got comfortable. And I felt like there was really good balance between, yardage situations. Like, for example, 1st and 10, you have a handoff with Audric Estime. He goes 6 yards. Okay, hey, 2nd and 4, that's pretty manageable. You can do something with that. Or he has a 6-yard, 7-yard pass on 1st down. And then now you have a 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 2, which I'll take my chances with Javonte Williams and Audric Estime in that situation. I just came away saying, you know what, these are the things that we've seen. I've certainly seen from him at Oregon, but these are also the things we've seen from him in the last week and a half at training camp. It's good to get out there on your first NFL game against NFL players and carry some of that over. Obviously, some room for continuous improvement for him, but I'd say a good start. Like I'd say there's a little bit more buzz right now with how Bo performed, really outside of Caleb. I think Caleb Williams probably had the most buzz, but Bo's getting some good recognition right now nationally, and he looked comfortable. And now you got to build on it going into week 2 of the preseason.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've discussed, and you and I talked about it out of training camp, Cody. The idea that when you're talking about Bo Nix and Caleb Williams, you're right, because after today, the national media seems to be looking at it that Caleb Williams had the best debut, and quite frankly, he did. But Bo Nix was right behind him, and you look at Jaden Daniels, and you look at Drake May, and you look at J.J. McCarthy, the guys that were picked between him, and I felt strongly that Sean Payton, probably in his heart of hearts, probably had Caleb Williams as number one ranked quarterback and Bo Nix as 2 because of the styles in which they played. And because of that, because there's synergy between the way Payton and Nix want to play, that's where I think there's a lot of optimism in the fact that Bo Nix, when you're talking about those 5 quarterbacks, we're going to put Penix aside because obviously he's behind Kirk Cousins. But those 5 quarterbacks, Bo Nix is not going to finish statistically 5th out of those 5. The setup is better for Nix here. The need is better for Nix here. And the Broncos are about as good a fit as you could get for Bo Nix. And fit is the dirty little secret of the NFL draft.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you have a coaching staff in place as well that Davis Webb has done a tremendous job. I've been very impressed with Davis Webb. Like, if before he became a coach, I really had no idea who Davis Webb was, but seeing him, listening to him, being able to meet with him from time to time and hear him talk about how he evaluates quarterbacks and what he did in the interview process to get a job from Sean Payton, they've built something really special. Now you factor in Sean Payton. Look, doesn't have a demonstrable history of drafting guys in the first round and developing them, but you've seen guys come into his system, guys like Teddy Bridgewater, Trevor Siemian. I mean, you go through the list, Jameis Winston. These guys have stepped into his system and have had success. And even a little bit at the beginning of last year, Russell Wilson started off pretty well, despite the Broncos defense struggling. So we were on, okay, hey, Sean's got this whole question about him. How is he going to bring in a rookie quarterback like Bo and build some things? I feel like we saw a lot of Sean's old offense that we saw in New Orleans, him run with Drew Brees, except a little bit more ability. Now you add more RPO stuff, the touchdown to Marvin Mims, RPO based. Bo's going to excel at that. And as I think we saw on that touchdown pass, he got the ball out there quick. He's got a little bit of a laser. And look, everyone talks about arm strength, this and that. Can you get the ball to where it needs to go? And I think one thing too, and look, it didn't count obviously, but I felt like his throw to Josh Reynolds high to the outside, I thought that was a beautiful throw, a missed opportunity there by Reynolds. And maybe the conversation's a little bit different if Reynolds hauls that one in. But Bo's had a couple of those throws to guys at practice, and the receivers haven't been able to haul them in. So they need to find a way to get that. But I think that stability, the environment, we talk so much about that in football. It's so important to have a sustainable environment around you as you go forward. And I think Bo's got weapons. I mean, the wide receiver room has a lot of guys in it right now. I heard you and Nate talking about Troy Franklin a little bit earlier, and I agree. Like, Troy's going to be fine. Troy's probably not going to be primarily focused in this offense in his first season, but he doesn't need to be. The Broncos don't need him to do that. Now, could Devon Vele have a more accelerated role early on? Yeah. But he's 26, 27 years old, has a little bit more experience, and really struggled with quarterback play at Utah the last year or so. So I'm excited to see really what Bo does going forward. I think he's in a good place in comparison to maybe some of these other guys that were drafted in the first round.
Well, let's look at some of the other standouts in this game. And the first one that comes to mind that is probably not going to be one that a lot of fans look at, but I noted it live, went back and looked at the coach's film this morning, noted it again. After Quinn Bailey broke his fibula, was lost for the year, there was the thought that for the Broncos, this was a problem because he was kind of the sixth offensive lineman and the guy they wanted to maybe bring in power formations. Demontre Jacobs was with the Broncos last year. He was phenomenal yesterday. Not good, extraordinary. Lead blocker on 2 of the touchdown runs, moving to the left, occasionally even pulling, getting downfield and finishing blocks. He was excellent to the point where you look at maybe replacing Bailey may not be just the option that maybe the Broncos need to take a look at Jacobs and give him a thought process that Garrett Bowles is a free agent after the year. Maybe he needs to be in the mix. I thought besides Bo Nix, Demontre Jacobs was the player that stood out to me the most in yesterday's game.
Yeah, it's a great point that you mentioned there with Demontre. And look, we got to see a little bit of Matt Parrott first, who they brought in the offseason. And I'll be honest, I didn't like what I saw there. If that guy is considered right now the backup to Garrett Bowles, there was one major instance where he got upended. He got planted on his bottom. And luckily, Bo's got good sense around him. I think that's another thing that stood out about Bo. Bo has a great sense of the pocket around him. And obviously, your left tackle gets blown up. That's not good. That's a recipe for disaster. And, he still found a way to make a throw and obviously extend the drive there. But Demontre Jacobs, I agree with you. I felt like had probably the most consistent day from any offensive lineman that I've seen out there. I like what I saw from Alex Palczewski at right tackle. Denver's just trying to figure out what their developmental aspects are. And look, you look at Palczewski, you look at Demontre Jacobs, 2 former undrafted guys, maybe not in the limelight to start right now, but if I'm looking at this first preseason game, I want to see Demontre Jacobs come out in joint practices this week against that Green Bay defensive line who is stout. And he's going to get a lot of playing time, not against the starters, but he's going to get against the second and third string guys in Sunday's preseason game. The one thing I want to see is, can he have another good performance? Because then that's a sign that your development with him is taking a step forward, right? And it doesn't have to be from undrafted to all-pro player, within 2 or 3 years, but you want to see steady growth. You need good depth. For the point you mentioned, Garrett is in the last year of his deal. Garrett's made it very clear he wants to return to the Denver Broncos, but financially, Denver's going to evaluate their options. And I think a lot of it, because Garrett has put the ball in their court, they need to evaluate where they're going this offseason. They have 25 unrestricted free agents set to test the market after this season. They're going to evaluate where they're at. Demontre Jacobs is certainly a player that they're very high on. A good performance from him, I think, elevating his stock here in week 1 of the preseason.
Yeah, and that's a good point with Bowles, obviously, because he is the highest paid player on the Denver Broncos. And presumably, if he doesn't have a bad year, even if he has a normal year, he's going to want what all players want, a raise. And that's a challenge for the Broncos in the next couple of seasons with their cap, where it is taking the dead cap hit from Russell Wilson and others, lessers from Justin Simmons as well. But obviously, the record-setting dead cap money from Wilson's contract. I want to look at another player that we had talked before the show, Jonah Ellis. I thought earlier in the game, Ellis had a couple challenges. Now, the motor was always going, but I thought at times he got a little manhandled at one point, kind of manhandled by the left tackle, Freeland, for the Colts on a few different plays, but then just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. I got a sack in the game, and then also the hit on the quarterback that ended up leading directly to an interception. Ellis's motor, which is in many of the people that scouted him that talked about he has ability and he can play maybe with the hand down or maybe a linebacker, but it was always about motor, energy, right? The guy's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps coming.
Yeah, no, he does. And look, I think he's got a combination of moves to his arsenal. I think he has the ability to be a deceptive speed rusher off the edge, but I think his bread and butter is going to be that power rush, right? Where he's going to take that stab into the tackle in the sternum or the shoulder. He does a really good job, I'd say, of keeping edge contained. Like there was one play where Slovis, the quarterback for the Colts, tried to get to the outside. And look, Slovis runs a 4.5 40-yard dash as a quarterback. He's very fast. But you saw Jonah Ellis kind of tracking him, I mean, really down the line of scrimmage and really forcing him into a tough decision. I think maybe picked up, got back to the line of scrimmage or maybe picked up 1 yard. But the motor that you mentioned is something that stands out. And look, I think that there are certain things when you combine him into the rotation defensively this season, which I firmly believe is going to be Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, and then Nick Bonito and Ellis coming in. And then Thomas Nkoum more than likely being that 5th guy there. I think he's had a tremendous camp. I thought he did well in the preseason yesterday. You're going to see these guys come in different situations, different pressure situations. And I'm curious to see if the Broncos, for example, if Ellis is on the right side of the defense lining up there, if you send a left side stunt or a left side pressure, it allows, I think, Jonah Ellis with his motor, if you can force the quarterback out the pocket, he can be the cleanup guy on a lot of situations this year. So I'm excited to see how it plays out with him. Effort is good, right? And obviously, as you mentioned, you like to see him step up in those situations. Like, yeah, you're going to get manhandled a couple of times. Like, it's the NFL. You're playing in the trenches. You're going to get got sometimes. It happens to the best players. But how do you respond? I felt like he responded relatively well. But here's the thing, too, Sean. I'll even touch on this. I felt like Denver's rookie class and even some undrafted guys, I felt like contributed immediately in preseason game number 1, which you don't always see that. But for their draft class, I came away relatively pleased. I know we talked about Troy Franklin. He only had the 1 target. He didn't get featured as much, but Marvin Mims was playing deep into the game as well for the Broncos. So Troy's going to come along, and maybe this is them trying to hide Troy a little bit. He hasn't, he's had a slow start, but he's been wrapping some things up. He's been having some good practices, but I don't think he's going to be ready just to be, to shine in the regular season. Could be proven wrong, but right now all signs point to them liking their receiver depth. But a lot of these young guys, this draft class that George Payton, Sean Payton have raved about, I liked what I saw initially from them in week 1.
I did too. Only Franklin and Vele, who had a mistake on one of his routes as well, really slipped up. And as you talked about, Nate talked about too, the receiver room is deep. You talked about hiding. Maybe they're hiding Franklin a little bit. Last player I want to talk about. I get that he was playing against the threes in many cases and even fours, but Blake Watson had 9 carries for 20 to 26 yards, a reception for 33 yards. Looked really good. He's going to be hard to hide on a practice squad, I suspect. The question I would have, and it was game 1, and obviously Sean Payton has been very, very supportive of Samaje Perine, who by the end of the year last year was their best back. When asked earlier in camp about 3 down running backs, only Perine actually got the mention specifically from Sean Payton. But when you look at Blake Watson's performance and you look at the bad performance by Perine and whatever, you bobbled a thing. It turned out to be a pick. It was in the preseason, and you have a body of work Perine does to stand on. But we've talked about the challenge of Javonte Williams, who looks like a different back again. Perine, McLaughlin, who's going to be a big part of this offense. I think that's already obvious. You look at Estime, who got a touchdown in short yardage. That one of the reasons they got him. And then you look at Watson. Well, Michael Burton's staying because we saw the Broncos run in the I formation a couple times pretty effectively. But Blake Watson, are we really looking at Watson and Perine for the last spot? Would they really go that young? Or do you still think that there's the idea the Broncos will get what they can out of Watson, and as an undrafted college free agent, if they lose him and can't put him on practice squad, so be it?
I think at this point, I don't think there's much concern unless he comes out in these next 2 preseason games and has a prolific performance that they lose him to another team. I mean, we look at the running back position right now. It's highly devalued by NFL teams. Right. And look, I mean, there's always a chance that Watson could be snagged, but I mean, right now, I think the clear pecking order here for the Broncos running back room, it's going to be Javonte. It's going to be Jaleel McLaughlin, who looked like the best back in Sunday's game regardless. And Audric Estime, look, he had the fumble. You're going to want to protect that. But, man, he's a bowling ball. You see what you can get with him. You work with him on that. Those are the 3 backs. I think as much as Perine has been valuable to them, was super valuable to them last year, the turnover, it just didn't make the offensive operation look good. That's a great pass by Jarrett Stidham. Perine, has had some ball security issues in some of those instances there. So for me, it's like they'll save $2.5 million in cap space too if they decide to move on. So I could see a situation where Perine has kind of been pushed out. Blake Watson, Tyler Beatty back on the practice squad this upcoming season. So much will be contingent, though, upon how these next 2 games go. What do they look like? It didn't help that Watson and this has been a thing for him. Watson has put the ball on the ground in a couple of practices as well, right. Drops the kickoff. And then now you have the drop thing that luckily, your offensive lineman was able to land on there and secure that. I mean, turnovers were brutal for Denver. Penalties were brutal once again. Those are areas they need to clean up. Yeah. But I would say this, it's going to be those 3 guys that I talked about. And I think it's going to be Beatty and Watson on the practice squad. And then you can play around with your game day elevations and things like that. Sean's very good about that. I think that's how it's going to play out. And look, not to say like this is a hot take here, but you mentioned Michael Burton. I love Muscle Milk Mike. Muscle Milk Mike's a dog. And he's so consistent. He's so good at what he does in terms of being able to pull and motion and kick guys out and lead. But, man, there's also Nate Adkins, who's also playing a little bit more of a hybrid role than what Mike is. He's playing that fullback role, but he's also playing it like as a tight end. He had a great design block that on the Bo Nix keeper on the left side. He's had a really good training camp. He's played big on special teams. So I'm very curious to see, do they carry Nate Adkins as a 4th tight end on this roster, keep Michael Burton at fullback, and then you keep 3 running backs with 2 QBs, 6 wide receivers, 7 or 8 offensive linemen, and then that's your offensive 53. I'm very curious to see how it plays out, but keep an eye on Nate Adkins and Michael Burton for a potential position battle.
Yeah, I agree with you, because on top of that, you talk about your pure tight ends. It is worth noting the Hunter Kampmoyer, 3 targets, 3 catches, 29 yards. That was for 4th best on the Broncos. But Kampmoyer, kind of a big target and more of a receiving type guy that they got off the Chargers, had liked him enough to keep him on the practice squad the last couple of years. It is not impossible that if they like the idea of Adkins there over the 32-year-old, when you're talking about Burton is actually the oldest player on the Broncos roster by a couple months, just ahead of Garrett Bowles. But I can see that as a possibility if they like Kampmoyer's potential and they believe Adkins could fill that role for the handful of times. hey, maybe that's the way you do it. And don't forget that P. Ryan was also for multiple years on third down, often on the field with Joe Mixon at the Bengals, and oftentimes as the lead blocker. So he's done that as well. So I agree. I think that's an interesting thing to watch over the next couple weeks. We'll be back out at training camp on Wednesday, and you'll see Cody Roark there as well. You can catch everything that Cody's doing in Mile High Sports, and of course, those to the Locked On Broncos podcast. Thanks so much for the time. A good debut for the Broncos. We'll see how they follow it up.
Absolutely. You want to keep stacking days, performances. And look, ultimately, it's not about winning and losing in the preseason. It's about how do you look in those instances? Can you clean up the penalties, the turnovers? If Denver can do that, I think that they're going to surprise some people this year. Excited to have it. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And Cody's been talking about the Broncos being a potential surprise all year long. Well, when you're dealing with real estate, surprises are the things you don't want, obviously, right? So, I mean, that's one of the major concerns and one of the reasons that you can talk to our friends at Key Real Estate, because, if you're selling your home, the Colorado market's been crazy for years, but you can call David and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that you have to be talking about luxury homes. It's about the service that you get from David and Mark, that high-end luxury service, whether you're buying or selling. Experts that know Colorado's market. You need experience, you need stability. 25 years in the same offices. Well, that's pretty stable. And they're privately held. You're not dealing with one of these big companies and you get whatever agent you get. When you call Dave and Mark at Key, guess who you get? Dave and Mark at Key. Inventory still low around the Denver metro area, so homes that are priced right still sell fast. So let Dave and Mark give you a free valuation. And now that summer's here, people are out every single day looking for homes. So there's no reason to wait. This is the most valuable asset you will probably ever own, is your home. You want to make sure if you're selling it that you get the maximum value for it. Don't wait. Let Dave and Mark represent you to make sure you're getting everything you deserve when you're looking to sell your home. Call Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group at 720-900-LIST today. That's 720-900-LIST, or visit them today at keyrealestategroup.com. Over in Paris, the Olympic closing ceremonies occurred. The handoff to Los Angeles next in 2028. Extra convenient for you American Olympic viewers, of which I am absolutely an Olympic nerd and enjoyed it. But the idea that perhaps the Olympics got their groove back, right? And years when you were dealing with it in Sochi or Beijing, or Beijing for summer and Beijing for winter. The challenges for viewing it for a lot of the world, the restrictions in those parts of the countries and holding it, the concerns with the IOC in putting them in those locales. Obviously, a lot of this felt like a refresh with Paris taking charge of it. And yes, maybe they tried a little bit too hard trying to clean up the Seine so people could swim in it. I guess, you're trying to aim high. But for the most parts, the Paris Olympics seem to be a monumental success. And not just for the U.S., for everybody, but especially for the U.S. This weekend, a pair of gold medals. The U.S. beat the French in both men's and women's basketball for gold. Close game for the women, by the way. The French were absolutely game. And the U.S. women won soccer. Again, they got in with Sophia Smith with the only goal against Germany. Mallory Swanson was the lead assist on that one. And then in the final, which the U.S. wins 1-0, and credit, by the way, to goaltender Alyssa Nair, who stepped up really big, especially late. But Swanson then goes alongside Smith. They flank each other. Swanson gets the inside the slot on the pass in the through ball. She catches it up and scores the only goal in the game, the 2-game winners to get to the gold medal game and then to win it by Colorado kids Sophia Smith and Mallory Swanson. Here's what it's. Congratulations to the U.S. women, to Colorado's Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith, and Lindsey Horan as well. And we'll talk about the Olympics in general, Nate, but in this particular one, remember that Emma Hayes, after the subpar World Cup that the U.S. had, Emma Hayes brought over from England to coach the team. And basically, welcome to the team. By the way, you're on for the Olympics. Since Emma Hayes has taken over Team USA, they're 10-0 with the gold medal. So way to jump in there for Hayes. Congratulations to the women. The U.S. with 40 goals, that ties China for the most gold medals, but the U.S. dominates in the medal count. China finished second with 91, the U.S. with 126.
Yeah, I think that happens sometimes, though. Let's be honest with the U.S. because, excuse me,
track and swimming.
Well, there are certain things that the other countries just don't participate in. I mean, they just don't.
Yeah.
The U.S. participates in like everything.
Everything.
And so of course you're going to wind up with the additional silvers and bronzes because you just have more opportunity.
Right.
I mean, I think it's like, it's almost like batting average, right? Like sometimes I wish I could take that and divide by the number of events participated in.
Mhm.
And then you get to the point where it's like, it becomes like batting average, but it also becomes like, oh, you lead the league in 3-pointers made. Well, yeah, but you also took, or you took 4 times as many as anybody else.
Right.
So I sure as hell hope you made more. Right. So, we can get into all of that. I just thought, and I know so many people were talking about this on social media yesterday, but can we talk about the fact that here's Europe? Things are very elegant and historical.
Mm-hmm.
They're very beautiful. And then we come in and we throw Tom Cruise off the roof, add a motorcycle, some not so great editing, and we close with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Snoop again.
Right. Yeah, Snoop's Olympics. But
you wonder why countries laugh at us.
Hey, the French decided to put Tom Cruise in there. The handoff to the other.
No, they did not. No, they did not. That was absolutely not the French. That was 10,000% NBC, Paramount, Peacock.
That's true.
It was a billion times over that.
You're right. But yeah,
it was Mission Impossible. It was Maverick. That had nothing to do with the French.
I mean, in the clip we showed you saw Tom Cruise sitting over there cheering on after Swanson's goal. I mean, he was omnipresent as well as Snoop Dogg.
Because he had to film all that crap at night so that they could piece it all together. No, folks, this is no different than when when Disney would put the various Marvel or Star Wars, take your branding pick.
They have a lot of them
on an interview on Sports Center.
Right.
It's no different. Just accept it. The French had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, maybe not.
The French were not even remotely interested in that.
That's a good point.
But I will say,
they go from decapitated Marie Antoinette heads in the opener to Tom Cruise driving away.
To Tom Cruise leaving with the flag. Like, peace out, bitches.
Yeah. Well,
I'll see you in LA.
That's we can talk all we want about medals and all of that, but there is part of me that goes, man, did we completely just vomit red, white, and blue all over those closing ceremonies? I don't even know. I flipped over to the channel. My wife and I are watching. All right. And I'm like, oh, look, Flea's actually got pants on. And then he started dancing around. And I'm like, well, they're actually not really pants because I can still see his underwear. It was just so perfectly America. And LA in particular. But it feels like that this, after, like I talked about some of the Sochi Olympics and multiple Beijing Olympics, this felt like the Olympics kind of got their global vibe.
They got their ish together.
And when you get to see that, and I get it, there was a bit of a delay, but now it seems like the Olympics, and give NBC and Peacock credit, they seem to wrap their head around the way to have a broadcast and streaming world and understand that people that are going to consume the Olympics, we're going to do both. And they seem to be relatively comfortable with it. And so that part is pretty good. It's just nice to see the Olympics seem like a big deal again without a lot of the nonsense. There weren't a lot of controversy. Obviously, we know about the one in gymnastics and the bronze for Jordan Childs.
Canada with their
that's
drones.
Silly. Canada with, early on, the first cheating scandal in the Olympics was Canadian soccer. Go figure. But for the most part, not a lot of drama. Obviously, Russia not allowed to compete again and solving a lot of that drama. It just was nice to see the Olympics be the big deal. And the stories, they were so cool. I mean, the Turkish air pistol shooter, the runner that you brought up from Botswana, the first ever gold medal for San Lucia, knocking off Sha'Carri Richardson. I mean, some of these really, really cool moments happened, and it feels like when there's less of that oppressive that the IOC took its bribe, let's just say it, to put it in some of the places that they put it. And that sort of puts a pall over the whole thing. And having it in Paris, having it handled the way it was handled, it felt like the Olympics had a comeback. And it was necessary.
You get yourself a big city, you get yourself a big a country that can handle it.
Right.
I just think you need, I think to a certain extent you need some of those pieces. But you talked about the broadcast side of it. Look, it was easier to find what you wanted to watch from the Olympics than it was the Broncos game yesterday.
Yes, it was. I mean, yes, it was.
That shows me
you're 100% right.
That shows me that, Peacock and NBC figured it out, because look, they're going to have to turn around and do that again. What streaming / device, whatever, is going to exist in 4 years that doesn't exist right now? We're going to find out, and that's going to change how we're consuming it at that point as well. But it did feel like they got it right. I always, at the end of the Olympics, especially over the course of the last handful, I always provide personally a little hat tip. I don't think you guys realize how difficult Mike Tirico's job is.
Oh gosh.
That's a very, very difficult job
to do.
Air
traffic controller.
And he always manages. He always seems to do it in such a way that it seems effortless. And believe me, it's not. And so I'm always very impressed by the job that Tirico does, juggling the different guests that he has in studio, not the least of which is Martha and Snoop.
Right.
Aside from everything else, but he handles all of the different handoffs that take place there, I think, very smoothly. Because it's the equivalent of all those years of Sunday Ticket of Andrew Siciliano, for whatever it was, 15 years.
Who was part of their Peacock Gold Zone, doing the same thing, bouncing back and forth.
But what Tirico does is that times 100.
Right.
When Siciliano's doing it, he's focused on one sport for one day. And Tirico does it for 16 days, where he's got to be able to juggle these kinds of things. And sometimes you don't know exactly what direction you're going or what your guest is going to be or the questions you're going to ask, because you're waiting to find out who's winning medals.
Right. Things are happening.
Somebody
while
gets
you're
disqualified and you suddenly have to change completely what you were planning on doing. And so that's why I like to give a lot of credit to him, because I think that it's a job that I know I'm not capable of doing without question.
Yeah. That's too much. That's too much for me too. And
congratulations. I'd be so lost.
It was well done. I navigated the streaming world, I think, better than virtually anyone has. And
like I said, you could find like air pistol shooting faster than you could find the Broncos game yesterday.
And you say that, and you are literally not wrong. I could not catch. Turns out I didn't really know it. So pardon me for not watching a lot of Channel 20, that I don't have it, despite the fact I have DirecTV. So I ended up,
I had it.
Yeah, I ended up watching the Colts broadcast, which was actually kind of entertaining because they were confused by the I formation. The Olympics next in LA in 2028, the next Olympics in 2026 in Milan and Corte d'Ampezzo, Italy. And that should be another really good fit. Obviously, they've held 3 different Olympics in Italy before. That will be the next one up. We'll see if Tom Cruise is filming another Mission Impossible.
He will be
by then, that he can pop.
We'll have like
that one.
We'll have like Maverick Reloaded, or it'll be something like that.
And whatever. Well, Snoop in the snow.
Hey,
when you're writing
$1 billion checks every time you do one of those movies, I'd be doing the same thing too.
Sure. The joke in, not spoiling anything, in Deadpool and Wolverine. I saw that this weekend.
That's so fun. It was fun.
Ryan Reynolds talks to Hugh Jackman's character and keeps repeating, it's like, you're going to do this till you're 90.
Right.
Yeah.
He's making
that much money, they'll pay you to come
and
back.
he's also poking fun at Disney too.
Yeah, of course.
Getting you stuck in all these kinds of
but the money follows, and if you ever want to know where the money works, it's the Olympics, the International Olympic Committee. So they're effective there. But we'll talk about the Denver Broncos now. After coming off their win, what do you expect to see? But I want to remind you before you do that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, you look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. You probably know where it is because it's been there for more than 100 years. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, but also a licensed childcare center, spa, massage, Pilates. You want to know what NFL players love, by the way? It's Pilates. I'm not joking. Big deal in NFL facilities nowadays, a golf simulator and more. But what really sets the DAC apart, what's kept it as the heart of Denver's community for so long, for over 100 years now, is that vibrant community, because it's a member-owned club and it's all about you. Offers year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The DAC is truly a club for your whole life. And now, for a limited time, members pay nothing in initiation fees. Initiation fees, zero, waived, zip, zilch, nada. So if you've ever wanted to try the DAC, and I bet you have, now's the right time to do it. Go to Denver Athletic Club and make sure you check it out. Join the DAC today. No initiation fees. The club for your entire life. Nate, welcome back to the program after talking with Cody there for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The Broncos now are closed to the media today. Normally, after game, you look at a lot of film and that sort of thing.
They're settling into, like, tomorrow's an off day,
right? Until Monday, Tuesday is off, and so we'll be back at it Wednesday. The Packers come in to camp, and there will be joint practice on Friday, and that will wrap up training camp. Training camp will end on Friday after that joint practice, and then the Broncos and Packers will play on Sunday night. Reportedly, the Packers are not going to use their starters in that game. So for the Broncos, who now had some interesting performances that you'd like to see them follow up, how does that make things a little more difficult for the evaluation process if you know that even when you put in your starters, and Bo Nix may be starting this game too, but he won't be necessarily facing other starters? How much trouble does that make it to evaluate?
I don't think it makes it incredibly difficult, because I still think one of the things that you're looking at very closely with him is the things that he can control beyond what the defense may do. So going back to what we talked about before, and I told you that I thought Ryan Harris broke it down really well, the botched snap that happened. I think that what you're looking for from him are the things that he can control external from what the defense may or may not throw at him. So it goes back to the things like trying to make sure that you sell the play action correctly, making sure that you have the right cadence for your offensive line, that, you don't have guys jumping and having a false start because they don't know exactly where you are in your inflections. I think those are the things that you want to make sure that you are working on in these practices this week, the things that you want to work on when you're doing the joint practice on Friday, and certainly what you want to do on Sunday night, regardless of whether you're going up against the second team or the third team. So there are things that he has within his control. And speaking of Bo Nix in particular, and the same way with some of the other rookies and some of the other players, I think that there's evaluation you can do regardless of whether you're going up against the ones or not. Would you like to be going up against them? Sure, because it may tell you a little bit more. But at the same time, regardless of who is on the Green Bay Packers defensive line, for example, lining up opposite, it doesn't change making sure that guys are getting off the snap the right way, that the offensive line footwork is the right way, that Bo Nix is doing the right things with his footwork or with how he's selling, a bootleg, like when he ran for the first down yesterday. So if there's things like that you can watch regardless of whether you have the ones on the other side, that's what I'm expecting by the time we get to Sunday. So from there, rewinding to what I would like to see during the week, it's more and more time with the ones, so that when he's working on, like I said, inflections, snap counts, trying to draw the defense offside, little things like that, that he's doing so with the five guys that are expected to line up in front of him.
The idea that Derek, when you're talking about the Bo Nix situation, right, and the idea that he ends up taking up QB1, I have the feeling that starts happening this week, with the expectation that he's going to start the game.
I think there's a reason that even last week, Sean Payton said, Bo Nix is starting game two.
And you saw, I think, enough to he'll be QB1, and barring something bizarre, I think he holds on to the job, and then this is all done after this weekend. Over on our comments from one of my early comparisons, I've talked about it before, Too Much Fun says, if his ceiling is Derek Carr, cut him right now, in response to Nix. Before we go too far on that, let me give you Derek Carr's career statistics. 64.9% completion percentage, 4-time Pro Bowler, 107 interceptions to 242 touchdowns. Now, the winning record is 72-87, but as we know, that's kind of a weird thing to connect to quarterbacks, since it's a game in which the offense is only on the field half the time. But if it turns out that if I'm right, and Derek Carr seems to be kind of a pretty good comp for Bo Nix, is that bad? Do you see someone else? Do you see a higher ceiling for Bo Nix?
No, but that's also because I don't like to make comparisons like that. I'm never this guy is a this guy comps out as blank.
Right. I'm just trying to look for similarities that people are familiar with.
It's not something that I personally do. I would tell you that if we can get somebody that has a better than 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, if we can get someone that can complete, I'll round it off, 65% of his passes. Remember, he had 74.4 at Oregon, which was an NCAA record.
Right.
So if he can do 65% of his passes, the biggest thing to me is, can he control and run the offense with a steady heartbeat? That's what I'm looking for.
And I didn't see any issues with that. I saw some rookie jitters early on.
Yeah.
The fumbled snap, the throw to Dulcich, which could have and maybe might have been picked.
Sure.
But after that, I saw a guy that seemed every bit as in control. He, to me, did not look, put it this way. There's this assumption that Jared Stidham is this stable veteran who you can go to and start, despite the fact he's only started 4 games. That's sort of bizarre to me. But anyway,
right.
I didn't see Nix as looking any less in control than I did with Stidham. And not only last night, but in the game Stidham started for the Broncos last year in the final 2. Nix, to me, did not look in any way inferior to Stidham, even with the mistakes. So I think when you see that already, you know the answer. And this has never been a quarterback competition. It never was. Told you that all summer long. This is about how long it takes Bo Nix to take the job. And the answer is, it happens probably this week.
Yes.
In snap counts because of the start in the second game. And I don't think he's going to give it back.
No, and there's no reason for him to. Not based on what's on the roster. And please stop acting like Stidham is a veteran.
Really?
He's a veteran on paper. You know who's a veteran? Joe Flacco, who played for the Colts yesterday. That's a veteran. So stop playing that.
Well, I mean, Zach Wilson has 30+ NFL starts.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Zach
that's
Wilson
is
more
a veteran, I guess.
Zach Wilson is more of a veteran than Stidham is.
Yeah.
So, when you're putting all these things together, look, I said it before, I'll say it again. I don't give a damn who the backup quarterback is. I will continue to say it matters the progress that Bo Nix makes between now and January 10th. End of story, folks.
Because this team is not a Super Bowl contender.
That's it.
This is a growth year.
That's all it is. That's all it is. Do you feel good about him as a fan? Do you see some sparks? And look, you know what? I really think the time that he was on the field yesterday is a microcosm of what we're talking about for this season.
Yeah.
He botched a snap. Probably should have had one picked. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
But that scramble to his left
bounced back.
And the dart that he threw to Cortland Sutton on the sideline so that Cortland could get himself in bounds and then fall.
Yep.
That was beautiful.
And the right RPO read, as Cody Roark explained, touchdown to Mims, which got
exactly. So did he screw up? Yeah. Did he do some good things? Yeah.
And he did the good things after he screwed up.
What the next 5 months are going to look like.
Yeah.
So if you came away from yesterday smiling, then you should keep smiling for the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to like about what the Broncos' performance is. That said, you don't go off. I think Broncos country social media may be a little doing what they do to get into the
it's just what social media does.
Right,
man.
exactly.
You know that.
The rest of the league is not as one of our notable podcasters around here pointed out. The rest of the league is not soiling themselves in fear of the Sean Payton Bo Nix connection just yet. And I would not say the Broncos are all the way back. If you're talking about the Super Bowl contenders, this is the beginning, not the end, of a very long road for the Broncos that will take not only this year, but next year until the salary cap stuff is squared away. And that will take 2 years. As Cody brought up, 23 to 25 unrestricted free agents this year. The Broncos are going to look very different next year too. This is the beginning of the road. But if you found your quarterback, even if it does turn out that he plays a little bit like Derek Carr, there are worse things that could happen because finding that spot is the trickiest one. And as I've said all along, I think this is a good fit. I think if Bo Nix is on another team with another coach, you're probably not talking about the same ceiling. But with Sean Payton, these two guys are on the same page, not only in the fact that they work on the Broncos playbook, but in their preferred style of play. So it's not like speaking another language like it was to Russell Wilson, who that style of play is completely foreign and absolutely opposite of what he's done over the course of his career. So that's one of the reasons to be really optimistic. So we will get back at it at training camp on Wednesday, of course, Nate. And I guess when you look at the joint practice coming up, and we'll do that a little bit later, but the Packers are an interesting team. They found their quarterback, obviously, in Jordan Love, who got paid. I look at these joint practices coming up, and I look at Nix's performance in the preseason game, and that matters. I'm actually more fascinated to see what he does on the practice field on Friday.
Yeah, I think the joint practices are going to be fun. And as they continue to expand the schedule, and we eventually get to 2 preseason games and 18 regular season games, these combined scrimmages, practices, et cetera, are going to become even more important for the coaching staffs and for players to be able to prove their mettle in terms of belonging on the roster following the cuts. So I think that by the time you start to see what happens on Friday, I think this has obviously been going on for a while. We've had joint practices for a while. But I believe that what you're going to start to see in the long run with the NFL is these becoming even more important than they are right now. I'm excited to see what happens on Friday. Like I said, I've come in with I believe, with the right expectations. I know that you had Cody on earlier. I know that Cody has a lot higher expectations of what this team can do. I respectfully disagree with him when he talks about win totals and things like that. But this team is finally doing what we have been hoping that they would do from a fan standpoint, and that is ripping the Band-Aid off and building. The Packers are in a different position. They found their quarterback already. And so you do kind of have an interesting yin and yang between.
And the NFC is soft.
These two.
The Packers can legitimately look at themselves as dark horse Super Bowl contenders.
They absolutely can. And there are a lot of people who have already made preseason predictions that have that believe that it will be the Packers that make it to the Super Bowl after what they saw out of Jordan Love last year. I think that when we get to that little dead zone between the final preseason game and the start of the regular season in Kansas City, I think that you're going to see more. You'll get all those predictions, right? Every analyst comes out and says, "Here's my AFC winner. Like here's my 7 teams on this side. Here's my 7 teams on this side, etc." I think that you will wind up seeing that the Packers, barring something happening here in the next couple of weeks of the preseason, are going to be a very popular, trendy pick on the NFC side of things. I think you will see the Packers. I think you will see folks that believe the Niners can do it again. But I believe I believe on the NFC side of things, it is a maybe not a precipitous drop off, because I could throw the Lions in there if they can manage to do what they did last season. And they are also in a division where it's just them and the Packers and that's it. But for the most part, I believe this is the Niners and the Packers. Talk about stereotypical from the 80s and 90s. I just believe those are the 2 NFC teams that we're looking at. So you're right. I think having a joint practice against a conference, a team that is capable of winning its conference is a nice thing to have.
Right.
It's a good exposure to have, especially for a team that has a lot of young guys.
It is. And that'll be valuable this week. We'll find out more about that as well. The Broncos kick off their preseason with a 34-30 win, a good start, the most points any team scored in the first weekend of preseason. I would say don't get excited. Broncos fans think that's going to be a habit, but obviously a good start. It's better than losing, and it's better than not having an effective performance. Bo Nix engineers scoring drives on 4 of his 5 drives. By any measurement, a very, very promising debut, and we'll take a look more over at it as the week goes along. So the Broncos season now underway. Excited to be able to tackle that with you. Appreciate it. Thanks to Nate Lundy being here. Of course, Cody Roark joining us on the stream. Appreciate it, but appreciate you, however you listen to it and consume it. We appreciate every single one of you who do, whether it's on demand or live. Just click that little subscribe there for even more. Danny Bailey is the man behind all of this. There, as you can see, literally no buttons. It's just Danny. So thanks for everything that Danny does. Best producer in the biz. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. For Nate Lundy, Danny Bailey, and everyone at Mile High Sports, I'm Sean Drotar. We'll catch you next time.